Hello everyone, my name is Sandra Shada Ortega Sanchez and today I'll be talking about the Cold War. Since the beginning of the centuries, all countries have had a lot of conflicts between them, and it could be politically, ideology, cultural, etc. First, you have to know something very important about the Cold War, and it was a war because it didn't involve any military forces or any military conflict. It was more about the ideologies. We have two main countries that fought, and it was United States being capitalist, and they wanted everyone to be capitalist. And there was the other side, there was the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union wanted everyone to be communist. The Cold War started right after the World War II ended, and the Cold War was between 1947 to 1999. The main difference between the communists, which was the Soviet Union, and the capitalists, which was the USA, is that the capitalists want people to have free markets, also individual freedom and democratic ideologies, but the Soviet Union wanted to have planned economies and also collective ownership of resources. Right after the World War II ended, all the Allies countries wanted all the countries that were under the Nazi power to have freedom so they can have their lives again and start to rebuild the countries. But Stalin, which was for part of the Soviet Union, didn't want this because they thought that everyone would be anti-Soviet. This is where the issue started. Europe started to be divided in two parts, which was obviously the communist part and the capitalist. In the communist side of Europe, obviously there was the Soviet Union, but there were other countries like Poland, Romania, Hungary, Bulgaria, etc. And in the capitalist part of Europe, there were countries like France, Italy, United Kingdom, Greece, etc. Two countries that were divided in two parts were Germany and Berlin. These ones had both parts, literally in the middle. One middle part, it was capitalist, and the other middle part was communist. There was a civil fight in Greece, so then both Soviet Union and the United States of America wanted to help, but the United States started to be very involved in this part, and they created the Truman Doctrine. We all know this, and basically the main point of this was to stop the communists. The Soviet Union obviously also created their own doctrine, and this part was very important because all the proxy wars started to happen. You might be asking, what's a proxy war? Well, the proxy wars are little civil wars in which both the United States and the Soviet Union wanted to help them. So what happened is that these both countries helped in civil wars, both giving soldiers weapons and money or economic parts. A very smart strategy that the United States have was to create the Plan Marshall, in which the United States gave a lot of economic support to all countries in Europe that were devastated because of the Nazi war. And this was because the United States wanted to expand their capitalist ideologies. Obviously, the Soviet Union found out about the Marshall Plan, so they went to all the countries of the side of the Soviet Union and told them not to accept the money, but they were actually, we need this money. So the Soviet Union created the Marshall Plan, in which they also gave money to his part of the ideology, which was the communist, and they gave money to them. This is where everything starts to get interesting because the Soviet Union started to experiment with new bombs that they had, but the United States didn't actually care because they had a lot of more powerful bombs. So this is where the armed race started to develop. Both countries started to develop hydrogen bombs. When Stalin died, he was replaced with Georgy Malkov, but nobody liked him, so he took Nikita Khrushchev in his place. Nikita didn't actually like Stalin, so he was talking bad about him, and then he started to have a conflict with China because China actually liked Stalin, so they were both fighting between them. Then the space race between the Soviet Union and the United States started to happen. They both developed a lot of technologies for the space. The first one to launch one was the Soviet Union, which they launched a artificial satellite, and obviously the United States right after that also launched a artificial satellite. The Soviet Union decided to launch a lot of spaceships into the space, in which they sent a lot of animals, and some of them were rabbits and rats. And the one that we most know is the dog Laika, which was launched in a spaceship called Sputnik. Then the United States launched a communication satellite, but for them to show the Soviet Union that they were going actually very serious, they created the NASA. First, the Soviet Union launched the first spaceship with a human in it, and it was actually very good for them. And then the American one actually did the same, but then they took a picture in space, and then the Soviet Union launched the first spaceship with the women in it. Then, as we all know, the United States launched the first flight into the space with real people, and they actually got to the moon. Meanwhile, all of this happened. A lot of the communist side in Berlin was not okay with being communist, so they were translating to the capitalist zone, but obviously the Soviet Union was not happy about this, and they created the Berlin Wall. Then the President Kennedy started to have a lot of power in the United States because now he was the president of the country, and then the United States and the Soviet Union started to spy each other, and in a lot of ways, both in like helicopters, people that were going to other countries to spy on them. And then the United States saw that the Soviet Union had a lot of missiles in Cuba, so they could fight with them. And the red telephone was established for the United States and the Soviet Union, so they could talk between them if they ever had a misunderstanding between them. But the red telephone actually didn't exist. There was no telephone or any telephone line for them to communicate between them. Then there was a pact that was between the countries for them not to have any nuclear power in them, but with the exception of some countries like the United States, the Soviet Union, China, etc. Then the Soviet Union created new laws and politics for them to have more freedom and also to give more freedom to people. The name of this were Perestroika and Glasnost. The Cold War ended when the Soviet Union started to dissolve, and this is how the Cold War ended. Obvious consequences of the Cold War is that the development of nuclear bombs was actually very bad, and the part that a lot of countries still have a lot of nuclear power, it's not good. Also the proxy wars, because a lot of countries started to have civil wars in which a lot of people were devastated and also died because of it. And also the division of Germany, it was very bad for all the people that were living there, most specifically in Berlin, because the Wall of Berlin was created. The Cold War was a very important conflict that affected thousands of countries in Europe and also around the world. But something good about this, it was that it was not as harmful as the World War II, and also there were a lot of developments in technologies like weapons and space things.